On the list of things that I did not expect to hear in 2025, Quebec asking for pipelines was definitely on there. I don't know what to make of this news, but I do know that it's important we talk about this on the channel. Just this morning, I made a video talking about how Canada was looking to reduce interprovincial trade barriers, that we were looking for a way that we could maybe cut down on some of the red tape between provinces and let Canadian businesses more freely do business across the country. And we talked specifically about pipelines, because that's one of the biggest sort of points of friction between the provinces. The province that is the most famous for rejecting pipeline deals is Quebec. And of course, what do I see when I check the news? Well, Quebec has called for natural gas pipelines to not only go through their province, but terminate in their province in this region where they are going to ship natural gas, LNG, to the world's oceans. So in today's video, I want to talk to you about three very important things. Number one, what is and what isn't being said in this article? What has been said? What's actually being, put out there versus the headlines? Number two, what companies is this going to impact? What Canadian publicly traded companies that we probably are invested in is this going to impact? And number three, what should you as a Canadian investor do about this news? If any of this interests you, please do subscribe to the channel. Make videos like this seemingly every day now. So let's dive into it. So first, I've got this up on the screen for you guys. This is just from the CBC. It's one of the more neutral sources I could find. And it talks about Quebec willing to rethink natural gas pipeline project. Well, the question first is, rethink what project? So the project specifically is LNG Quebec, which I think they called NGL Quebec in French. And basically this project was pumping a huge amount of natural gas from Northern Ontario, where it sort of could connect up to the Alberta through Ontario system into Quebec to the ocean. I mean, you can see the body of water this would be put on. It looks just like the west coast of BC, really, with these sort of fjords, where you could have large tankers sail up the St. Lawrence in this case, up into the region, collect the liquefied natural gas and ship it to the Atlantic provinces. And it was killed for environmental reasons, which really means in Canada, if somebody says, oh, this is killed for environmental reasons, it means the public was not in favor. And that's really important to talk about. And it will be mentioned in a moment here. So with the uncertainty, Quebec's environment minister says the province is interested in taking another look at it. He says, we're not opposed to energy projects that respect the environmental criteria. Hugely important here. He's saying he is offering this. This isn't, whatever company came to the government and said, hey, can we try this again? No, this is the environment minister of Quebec saying, hey, we are willing to put this on the table. And importantly, we are not opposed to energy projects that meet the environmental criteria. Could that mean Energy East back on the table? So a pipeline going through Quebec over to the maritime provinces where it could ship oil as well? We don't know. But he is offering this. And he says a couple other interesting things. We see on the screen, this is a photo of the minister, Benoit Charette, I think, who is the person responsible for this project. I do want to point out a couple of things. Quebec is sort of gearing up for their provincial election. So the current government is probably looking at ways they can encourage the population. And he also mentions that as well. So he talked about plans being sort of studied on their merits. If it's a project that could be accepted, projects are studied based on merits. We'll respond to those concerns, all these sorts of things. But importantly, when he was giving this speech, he talked about how if the public will accept it, they will likely build it. This is exactly what we talked about this morning. Public acceptance of these projects is what's changed. This person probably doesn't have a hugely different opinion on the validity of natural gas pipelines than they did 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when the first project was killed. But who does? It's the Canadian public. It's the voting public. And I think that's hugely important, because what's really being said here is not that the government necessarily will allow a project. It's that the people will. And that's huge. So let's move on. Talk about what companies are going to be impacted. I'm sure you understand the spiel by now. We're talking about producers. In this case, think of a Tourmaline, think of a Peyto, think of any of the varieties of big Canadian natural gas producers. But also, obviously, it's going to impact any Canadian energy producer. Because while the headline here is about liquefied natural gas, he does say projects. So it could also mean that we're getting Alberta oil and gas to the Atlantic. Finally, it could mean that we're getting these liquefied natural gas products just to the Canadian market in Ontario and Quebec, where it could fulfill some of the demand that is there from the largest population centers in the country along the Windsor to Quebec City corridor. It could also mean that we are going to see expansion of Canadian production. And you might be thinking, why? Well, right now, the big weight hanging over the heads of these companies is their reliance on the United States and the United States' own energy production, cutting that reliance down. So these companies ship so much of their product to the States, and that has been at such a discount that there's not a huge incentive to increase production. Increasing production is expensive, cuts down on free cash flow, cuts down on the availability to return dividends, it cuts down on profitability numbers, it doesn't look good. And if you're selling your product at a discount, it's not a good strategy. But if this news means that Canadian oil and gas can be shipped to more markets around the world at a better price, that could mean another boom of Canadian oil and gas production. And if that happens, then yes, Tourmaline, Peyto, Cenovus, CNQ, Suncor, Imperial, all of those companies will see increased profits, increased stock prices, and you will make a profit. But if you're a risk taker, and I'm not saying I am, or that you should be, imagine the profits on some of those exploration companies, on the companies that are exploring and developing wells for these big companies, on the companies that are looking for different ways that they could extract oil and gas, on the companies that have bought up land speculatively, looking for more production that they could then sell to these companies. This is the junior miner of the oil and gas space. Those companies, if this news turns from speculation and hopefulness to concrete plans, to money laid down, to pipe put in the ground, every time you see a headline like that, you're going to see these exploration companies explode. And that, for a risk taker, is huge. Now, if you're like me, what am I going to do? I am probably going to be investing more dollar cost averaging into the big producers. Those are the companies that can survive the bad times and thrive in the good times. I'm not a huge gambler. I'm not a huge risk taker. It's not something I do. But I could see maybe just a little bit of money on some of these interesting smaller companies. And if I do, I will definitely talk about it on here. But that's about all I have for you folks today. I won't take up too much more of your time. It's been a really, really interesting topic. There's a lot going on. I'm really, really interested to see how the story continues to develop. I genuinely think this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Canadian investors. Because if projects like this get approved, you will see these stocks never touch these prices again. I am confidently saying that you will see some stocks move and never return back to the low prices we're at today. Some of these companies will be changed forever if any of these projects get approved. With that being said, I hope I catch you in the next video. And if you enjoyed, please do subscribe to the channel, like the video. It means a huge amount. Doesn't cost anything.